Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and of course a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Elizabeth Townsend Guard. I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School, and I just wanna quilt. So today our guest is Hayley Foster Gray. She is part of our quilting army. She joined our Facebook group and reached out, and she's so much fun. She's so much fun. We talk about printing, silkscreen, stamp printing and fabric, quilt entrepreneurship, and just the love of quilting. I hope you enjoy it. It was a blast talking with Hayley. But I can hear you. I got a little nervous for a second.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. So, how are you doing this late afternoon?
I am really good. I'm excited to talk to you.
I'm excited too. This is great. All right, hold on. Let me get to my page, and my phone is making noises. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Let's get to the page. I'm super psyched too. Okay, I'm not distracted. So someone complained that I was typing. Usually I take notes, so I'm trying to be really quiet when we do it tonight, but I'm not sure we'll see.
Oh, no worries.
It's so funny. Okay, so I'm super psyched to chat with you. Your stuff is super cool. I want to talk to you about your quilting life and printing fabric and the big projects versus small and ripping out projects and your vinyl and t-shirt stuff. And then didn't you post stuff with your kids at
yeah.
It was at the Charleston. What show was that? Do you know? Do you know what it was called?
It was, I believe it's called the Charleston Cobblestone Guild show, something like that. It's called Cobblestone Guild, I believe.
Okay. Hold on. She posted pictures. Okay. All right. Does that sound good? And we're going to try to go like 20 minutes to a half hour, and then it always drags longer because, we have stuff to talk about.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right. So we're going to start, and you're cool with this being recorded and, put out there as a podcast?
Yes, it's fine.
I know. Well, you have to ask.
I know.
Somebody was surprised it was going to be on a podcast. I'm like, yeah, but didn't you hear it on a podcast? Anyway, it's all good.
Is that how you found us? Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like, I didn't expect it to be out on a podcast. I'm like, didn't you find us on a podcast? Okay, whatever. It's all good. I'm learning. There's a lot of weird stuff out there. I know. People are weird. Anyway, and people are lovely too, so we get to chat. So let's start with the first question we asked. Tell me your name and where you're calling from today.
Okay, Hayley Gray, and I'm calling from Somerville, South Carolina.
All right, let's do it one more time because it bounced out. I'm not sure why. So let's just take the level. Just say hello real quick, and let's make sure the levels are okay because it was kind of weird.
Okay, hello.
Okay, that was fine. But when you said your name, it got all weird. Okay, so if it gets weird, I'm just going to interrupt you when you're talking, and then we'll just stop, and then do it again. So if it kind of cuts out or gets garbly. It's not out of rudeness. It's really more just...
Yeah, no problem.
All right, so tell me your name and where you're calling from.
Hayley Gray, and I'm calling from Somerville, South Carolina.
That's awesome. Yeah, okay, cool. Awesome. Well, so we're going to ask you, what's your first memory of someone sewing or quilting in your life?
It's funny. I've been listening to the podcast, and I've been like, what did I say?
But it's interesting, right? People have a lot. It's really varied for one silly question, right?
It is. It's funny because my mom was, did a lot of sewing growing up, but she was also kind of a jack of all trades with all types of crafts. But I would say earliest memories are probably when I was maybe second grade, something like that. And my mom is a great seamstress, and she would make a lot of clothes. I'm from a family of 9 kids, so she would make a lot of clothes and a lot of knitting, and we had a loom the size of the car in the living room. So she did a lot of craft stuff.
That's really
but
cool.
she learned to sew in high school because she grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Yeah, and she, she tells the stories of she couldn't get to a department store because she was in the middle of nowhere, and it was like, the famous stories of riding a bike with no wheels uphill both directions,
Yeah.
So she learned to sew. And then she very proudly, would tell us that she was voted best dressed in her high school with her own wardrobe. So that was always a real
really cool
sense of pride for her.
That's huge.
So she had like a bunch of patterns, and she would make that kind of stuff. She would say that she was not a quilter, but we did have quilt pieces hanging in the house growing up. And then I would say probably, second, third grade, she had patterns and stuff laid out either on a ping pong table in our basement at one point, or the dining room table. And she would be working on different projects at different times.
That's really cool. And when did you start sewing or quilting?
I would say I always was kind of with her. I remember my parents bought me this really cute little sewing machine toy when I was real little. It had like a pull string, and it would mimic a sewing machine. And I remember sitting next to my mom and having my little toy one and playing.
It's very sweet.
But then, and then I think about that age, third or fourth grade, my parents bought me like a battery operated little Singer, little tiny kid one. And then probably got serious about sewing about 13, 14, something like that.
That's very cool.
And then we made, I decided I was not into patterns. I was not into garment making. For whatever reason, I'm not a rule follower when it comes to patterns. So I ended up making my first quilt when I was about 13. My friend was PCSing. She was in a military family and PCSing to California, and I wanted to give her something special. Aww. And so I convinced my mother to help me make my first, like a, super basic strip quilt that we rotary cut and put together. And we I don't even remember how we did it, but we photo imposed a bunch of pictures all over it. And that was my first project.
That's really cool. I was about 13 too when I made my first quilt. It's like the kind of
awesome
initiation into like quilting. Now, did you keep quilting, or did you take a break once you did your first one?
Well, when I did the first one, I remember it being I was super proud that I did it, but kind of overwhelming at what a big task it was.
Yeah.
So I remember doing a lot of little projects. I did, I've heard you talk on these podcasts about purses, and I was into purses.
Yeah.
And I did little things like that, little, small attainable projects.
Yeah.
And then I would say my senior year, I was in high school. I was real into the art program, and I got real into painting fabric and painting panels, sort of. And my art teacher in high school was like, you should make these into something. They're just stacking up, And so I was sort of, rebelling against the idea of doing a pattern type quilt. And she was like, well, she was the first one that kind of introduced me to it. You don't have to follow a pattern, just do what you want to do.
Yeah.
And she had this box in our art studio in the high school that had all these samples. So it had, polyester and leather and silk and lace and faux fur and all of these amazing, different textures. And she said, just go to town, take one of your panels and just start framing it up and just go where the wind takes you. And that was, I think, the first project I did that I really fell in love with it, because I loved all the different textures and putting them together. And it was really, I didn't even know that improv quilting was a thing, but it was an improv type quilt.
And what did it look like? What did it look like once you got done with it? Do you still have it?
I do. It's my favorite, and it's actually my kids' favorite because they love all the textures.
That's really cool.
When they were baby babies, we would lay them on it, and for hours, my kids, because you could, touch there's a leopard faux fur and corduroy and silk and lace and all these different colors and textures, and they would just lay there and touch it and play with it. And there's some definite worn spots on it now, but really it's cool. Still in my living room right now. Yeah, and we use it all the time. But it's just real. I mean, I thought I didn't kind of have a size when I started. It was just kind of go to whatever I went. Yeah, that's good. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of like a single bed.
Do you still do that? Because I do that all the time. I'm just like, okay, this is good enough. I'm done.
Well, Or I get to a point where I go, I know if I make this any bigger, I'm never going to finish.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
And
so it's about single size.
Yeah, about single size.
Yeah, it's about single size. It's got 3 main strips of kind of color and texture, and then the panel in the middle that I had painted at the time.
Oh, cool.
Very simple. Yeah, very simple, but it kind of was the first time that I really fell in love with doing it and went, okay, this is cool. I really like this.
What kind of paints did you use? Can you wash? I mean, I imagine you can wash the blanket. What kind of paints did you use for the blanket? The panel in the middle. At
the time I did a lot of, and I still kind of use them, a lot of silkscreen inks. Mm-hmm. So you could buy the kind of ink, and then now I have a chemical fixer. At the time you have to set it with heat. Oh, so you would have to paint it and then set it with an iron. And then now when I use those for like block printing and stuff, I have a chemical fixer that I mix into the paint that kind of sets the heat, section.
Tell me about what you do now. You put up some video of it and a little bit of samples, right, of the printmaking you're doing on fabric.
Yes. So it really didn't start as wanting to do fabric at all. I actually got into relief printing, so kind of stamp making almost. Uh-huh. And this is probably a year ago now, and I started taking some of my own drawings and transferring them over. I started with linoleum, and I kind of moved into rubber, depending on the type of project I'm doing, and then carved it out. And then I started making prints, and actually I did them as like Christmas gifts for a couple of friends and my mom, of course, because as your mother, they love everything that you do on your own, you know.
That's awesome, right? That's what mom's supposed to do.
Yeah, go to Joann's, get a frame, and they'll love you forever, you know. So I started out just doing some printing stuff, and then separately started looking at silk screening and trying to figure out how to silk screen. I just wanted to kind of play with it, and I bought a little kit on Amazon and had it sent to my house. And the silk screening I found really frustrating, so I kind of put that aside, and it kind of collected dust for a little bit. Well, then when I started making the prints, I went, oh, this would kind of be a cool backing for a quilt. I wonder what it would look like if I transferred it over. And then I had to kind of research and do a lot of trial and error on the inking. And I found the fixer, which was a huge time saver. The first couple of prints I did a full yard, and I printed it out.
Oh my gosh.
And my kiddo helped me. They're always super involved, which is awesome. So they helped me do it. And it took so long just for that 1 yard to iron it and fix it with the heat.
Interesting.
So,
and you were using the silk paints to do it. So is that what you were using for those?
Right, the silk screen paint, and then I had to kind of figure out what tools to use. And I had read a couple of blogs that I found. Instagram had a plethora of information, kind of rabbit holes to fall into and research it.
Yeah.
And I found the right kind of rollers, that would work for that paint and for fabric, and how to make it look smooth and not bubbly, you know. And so I eventually kind of figured out a rhythm with what kind of tools to use, and I found the fixer, which was a huge lifesaver, because now I no longer have to iron them. I just have to let them set for about 2 days. So I hang them on like a little sewing line or a laundry line in my sewing room, and I let them cure, so to speak, for about 3 days, and then throw them in the washing machine and to go.
Wow, that's really cool. That's a lot of trial and error. Did you ever feel like just giving up when you were doing it?
Yeah, but it was really fun.
Yeah, it was fun?
Yeah, it was fun. I gave up silk screen pretty damn Oh, I don't know if I can say that. Sorry.
That's okay. It's a grown-up show. It's all good.
That's right. I gave up on, I still have all my silk screen stuff, and I did some silk screening, but I just couldn't quite, there's like a filling liquid, and it's like a certain type of liquid you paint on the silk screen. I tried making my own silk screens by like stretching them over like some hoops and some frames, and I just didn't quite master that. But I really enjoyed the carving, like the process of carving out.
The carving you did that you put up is so pretty. It's very intricate. It's really cool. So you do the carving on the rubbery thing, right? On the rubber? And then
Yes.
you put the
It's like the edge of a pencil. You know, the end of a pencil.